Caden's POV.
Stupid. Just stupid. The walk back to my study was brisk and almost painful as I stomped my way down the stairs. Angry couldn't describe what I felt in that moment. I pushed the door open harshly and slammed it after me, hard enough to send the glass in my hands reeling on the ground. I was leaning against the door, breathing heavily and raking my hands through my hair. I was pissed, and the last thing I cared about was the shards of glass now scattered on the ground. What was I thinking? What the fuck was I even doing? There were goosebumps glittering my exposed arms. I despised her guts despite her goody two-shoes demeanor. I hated that somehow everything about her was growing on me. Her scent? It was the same reason I'd subconsciously filled some of the flower pots with freesias. I wanted to forget that scent that reeled me in, yet I tossed it in the wind and kissed her. Her dark eyes? I saw them in every other eye. The way she spoke? There was something polished about it, and it constantly reminded me of the fact that she had been another alpha's wife from a pack I'd never even heard about before. Not just his wife or mate, but a fucking cheat. I didn't want to have anything to do with her. I had made that resolve not to let myself be swayed one more time by a fucker like that. But no, I kissed her. What bothered me more was that I liked it. Yet it felt like it was Amaya once again in my arms. I couldn't help but reminisce of the first time we'd ever kissed. It was just like this, in my room, when we both admitted that we loved each other regardless of whether or not we were mates. She was shy, heck, we were shy as fuck. And it felt so right. It felt right with Larissa, in all the wrong ways. There was a difference this time. It felt like I had kissed a broken doll who could do the things Amaya couldn't. She didn't seem to ever realize when I was upset or too hurt to speak. She didn't even consider me or her baby before running off with that bastard Nick. I had been startled when she pointed out my thoughts, despite my hostility. My thoughts felt vulnerable to her. The thought of that made me want to hate her more. But she looked so innocent. You're one confused bastard, Caden. Shut the fuck up, Peter. I wasn't confused. But how the hell was she pulling me in like that? It didn't make any sense. She's your mate. And I object. So, get lost. Letting out a sigh, I shook my head as if that would drive my thoughts away. I needed a distraction. Glancing ahead, the monitor on the screen caught my eyes. Of course. What better way to get her the fuck out of my head than to finish up on my work? Without any more thought, I made my way to the desk and took a seat before turning on the monitor. I needed to ET her out of my head, and I needed to do that fast. Asterisk. The last few days have been severely underwhelming, save for work and an unwarranted visit from yet another fucking Luna who just can't keep it in her pants. The whole lot of them were irritating and horribly testing my patience. I could remember when one nameless fool who showed up in all the regality of the one who'd brought me obsidians and onyxes, professing love and strong ties between our packs. For the love of all things good, I was tempted to claw the fuck out of her face. Hunting felt like a million needles pricking at my skin. Those bloody hyenas were popping up like weasels every hunting day. Where the fuck were they even coming from? It was only a matter of time before I raised the entirety of their kind to extinction. But even worse, she was avoiding me. Larissa. She'd always managed to evade me. I didn't want to see her either, and concerned that I may do something to her again, like sending her to prison. Yet a part of me longed for her. Standing there in front of the mirror with a black tie in my hands, I could vividly visualize the curved outline of her petite frame. The way her wavy blonde hair often hung down in a high ponytail, the way the sides of her lips twitched when she was nervous, and the way her eyes were prone to looking at everything but me when she fiddled with her fingers. Damn, her actions were delicious. But I feared that it was more than just mere physical attraction to her body. And I'll be damned if it was anything else. She is just as much a cheat as Amaya is, don't forget that, I reminded myself, wrapping the black fabric beneath the collars of the peachy shirt tucked in perfectly in my pants. Knotting it carefully, I shook my head one more time before looking at myself in the mirror. I ran one hand through my hair to fluff it out for volume. I didn't want the whole officiality tied to being the CEO of my company today. I fluffed it out one more time, straightening my back muscles before grabbing my keys and walking out of the room. I went to Declan's room first, where I met him resting peacefully on his bed. When I saw that he was enjoying his rest a little too much, I chuckled. It had been such a long time since I'd seen him run around or play the way he has ever since Larissa came here. Perhaps he needed to recharge. Shutting the door quickly, I turned on my heels and continued down the stairs. Then I remembered. Jackson had left me a file in the study last night. He'd said it was important, but not enough to distract me from my meditation. I sighed out before walking to the study, but my eyes narrowed visibly at the sight in front of me after the figure had bumped into me with wider eyes the size of mini saucers. "Oh, I am so sorry," she started, cutting herself off when she looked up to see who she'd bumped into. She straightened almost immediately, patting at her apron before clearing her throat harshly. "I'm sorry." I stared at her face darting around for a few seconds before I was snapped back to reality. "I should go."
"Stop right there."
I cut in sharply. "I didn't say you could leave." This was the same woman that I was hell-bent on driving away. But I just couldn't let her leave. Part of me wanted to apologize for walking away the last time, but she was a fucking Omega. I couldn't do that and compromise my authority. That just wasn't me. She stood there, clenching her eyes shut. What was she thinking? "What should I do then?" she questioned softly, finally raising her head to look at me. Her eyes held no emotion, and it irritated me. I preferred to see her afraid of me rather than running her mouth. Cocking a brow, I crossed my arms. "Why is Declan still in his room?" I blurted out, not knowing why exactly I couldn't let her go. It was more than obvious that she was avoiding me at all costs. She tilted her head in slight confusion, now crossing her hands behind her back. "You didn't know? Declan isn't feeling well. He had a nightmare last night and I had to nurse him before inviting Annalise to take a look at him." She answered swiftly and looked away again. "Wait, what? What?" "He's fine now, but he needs to rest." She finished and brought her head up. I could definitely taste the vile in her tone. She was upset. What fucking right did she even have to be? She continued to look at me before she brought one hand to wipe at the rim of her eyes. Surprised, I saw that there was liquid in her eyes. Wait, was she crying? "Are you crying?" I questioned subconsciously, eyes widening. She said nothing, instead making frantic efforts to clean her tears. It didn't work. She shook her head slowly and started to walk away, but I turned on reflex and pulled her back by the arm. "Answer the damn question and don't walk away from me." I snapped a tad bit harsher than I wanted to, but it did the job. She flinched and looked at me with a mix of fear and surprise in her eyes. "I got something in my eye." She lied. If anything, my eyes narrowed even further. I couldn't understand what I felt seeing her like this. It was beginning to feel like being clawed by a hyena. Why was she crying? Is it because of what happened at the balcony that day? Because of that? Her eyes widened, her lips parting ever so slightly as if she was going to say something. But the words never came out, instead hanging in her throat. My curiosity piqued, wondering what her smart mouth had to say about it again. But the rapid buzzing in my pockets forced me to shift my attention. The phone wouldn't stop ringing, to the point where it was growing irritating. Looking at her one last time, I reached for my pockets and swiped out the phone. I glanced at the caller ID, surprised to see a phone call from Jacob. Why didn't he just mind link me? Why call? What is going on? I questioned, bringing the phone to my ears. I could hear panting from the receiver and a sudden uneasy feeling bubbling in the pit of my stomach. Something was wrong. Something was definitely wrong. "My lord, there is a situation this morning." His voice sounded like broken muffles. "A horrible situation. I'm on my way to the woods on the Luna's orders to find a murderer, but all the evidence points to the Luna herself." "You're not making any fucking sense." I snapped irritably, still holding onto Larissa's arm. The heavy breathing continued before he finally continued. "Her suitor, Nick, was found dead this morning in the living room of the pack house. My thoughts are, she realized that he once had ties to Griffinhowl. Whoever was responsible for Derek's rebellion has his claws deep in the South Sea pack as well. The Luna was just a distraction, and we fell for it."
Larissa's POV.
The bed felt the most uncomfortable since I had come here. I used to be grateful for having a roof over my head and such a bed to sleep in after so long. Now I wasn't so sure anymore. His eyes had grown even colder towards me ever since that day at the balcony. Why the hell did I even cry? Saying I wasn't confused was some serious understatement. He kept saying one thing, yet his body did another. What even was I doing with him? Why did I keep letting myself find excuses for his actions? He kissed me and was acting like nothing at all had happened. If anything, I was certain he was disgusted by it. He told me how filthy I was so many times. How would he even see me in any other light? I pushed the pillows away to where the headboard would have been if I had one, ultimately deciding to sprawl my hair across the bed to substitute for the uncomfortable pillow while staring at the blank ceilings. But he wanted to say something this morning. Although his eyes were icy as hell, his body language was going to say something. It was just upsetting that he was too dense to realize that I was crying because I didn't know what to feel anymore. It made me feel even stupider. But I couldn't help but be curious as to what he had heard over the phone for his face to fall faster than lightning. But then, the question remained how exactly he felt towards me. Was he attracted to me? Did he see me as his mate but too egotistical to admit it? Or was he simply toying with my feelings? I tossed to the side, curling up in a fetal position with my face towards the windows. It was one cloudy afternoon, even the weather was refusing to cooperate with me. It looked as depressed, maybe even more depressed than I was. There was a soft knock on my door before its knob was twisted open, catching my attention. I forced myself to turn around. Nobody ever came to my room, so who could it be? I could feel my muscles tense up. What if it was him? What if he was here to punish me for crying or something else? I hissed a sigh of relief when it was only Gwen at the door. She had a soft smile on her face, causing me to cock a brow until I saw the small figure running into my room at full speed. Declan, no running. I yelped in surprise, shooting off the bed immediately to hold the boy in place. He was running towards the closet, and I knew better than to let him rummage through my closet of old clothes. It could well turn into a severely disorganized version of the thrift store. I tripped over the only other furniture in the room, cursing under my breath when I stubbed my little toe against it, and there was a giggle from Gwen. The nerve of them both. I finally reached out to pull the toddler, gently tossing him on the bed and patting at my chest. I know you're a sensitive kid, but I wouldn't hesitate to smack your butt the next time you're a naughty boy. Understood? Gwen scoffed at that, tittering as soon as she reached the foot of my bed. She plopped onto it with the side of the bed dipping in her weight and the already tousled bed covers crumpling even further. As if, Larissa. We both know you have a soft spot for the kid. You love him too much to touch a hair of his head. That's because his father might as well have my head. I let out with a laugh, pulling Declan close and recoiling towards the wall while sitting cross-legged. There was an expected snort from Gwen and a well-foreseen eye roll at that. Trust me, I've seen worse with the previous nannies. One even had her fingers broken from torture when she was caught badmouthing Declan's preference for vanilla scents. The alpha was so pissed, you do not want to be part of whatever happened that period. She gasped dramatically, bringing both hands to cover her lips as if in blasphemy. I rolled my eyes at her comment. On the contrary, whether or not he's attached to the scent because of his mother, I would rather not know. My fingers are necessary to heat up milk and pick a lock. Excuse me? You know, in case I get locked up another time for loving Declan a little too much. I corrected, snuggling into his neck just enough to earn a giggle from him and a hearty laugh from Gwen. You're out of your mind, Larissa, she said amidst laughter, causing me to laugh as well. It's good to not see you so uptight. You can be quite funny. I rolled my eyes at her comment, although playfully. She was right. Somehow, I may have lost my inner child and myself as well to everything that has been happening to me. But despite it, I was happy just holding the boy in my arms. If only my mate would somehow accept me for who and what I was instead of abandoning me to deal with my feelings, we could be an actual family. It would be magnificent, even if it was simply wishful thinking. Isa? Larissa? Larissa! The frantic voice snapped me back to reality, and I whipped my head to look at Gwen sitting in front of me with a lieu of concern. Back down to earth, Larissa. You're spacing out, what are you thinking of? I shook my head in responsive denial. Nothing at all. I'm just stressed, that's all. Cooped up in this room the whole day, yet you're stressed? Like that happens every day. She was clearly not buying my excuses. I couldn't tell her exactly what it was. She would see me as an idiot instead. Gwen. MHM? What do you think would happen if you fell in love with someone you shouldn't? Will you pursue your feelings or you'll forfeit it because you don't believe it would work out? I asked slowly, studying her reaction. She looked taken aback by my question, shocked even, making me uneasy. Did she already know? She relaxed after staring at me for a moment, now staring at nothingness as if in thought. She folded both arms, before looking at me again. Well, I feel attacked. Because I think I'm in the same situation, Larissa. Don't let a single wolf know about this, okay? Well, I did not expect that answer. She looked genuinely concerned, staring intently at me, and I nodded. Promise. So I don't think I would pursue it. I'm in love with one of the Geminis. Ever heard of them? I shook my head. They're Alpha Caden's most trusted warriors. They're excellent fighters, sometimes I believe he trusts them more than he does his own beta. His name is Jacob. He's sorta a Casanova, but I can't help it. He's so charming and the sweetest and I think someone's in love. I teased, watching her roll her eyes after. You had literal stars in your eyes right now. But he's not my mate. His twin is, but he's too busy sleeping around to admit it. So, I don't even know what to do since I may have made out once or twice with Jacob and his brother doesn't know. She countered, sobering up immediately. She was now staring at the ceiling while I had my mouth hanging open in shock. That was the last thing I expected to hear. The actual fuck? That's messed up, Gwen. I know, there's no need to tell me that. The point is, I can't pursue it. I know nothing would ever happen between Jacob and I, so why set myself up for heartbreak? She finished with a heartbreaking smile, shaking it off. In a second, she was smiling widely again, tapping at Declan's arm to get him to play with her. I wasn't going to lie, I was perplexed by Gwen's sudden confession. If anything, I didn't see myself in a better situation. Why are you curious, by the way? I shook my head at her question. It wasn't important for her to know. I flashed her a quick smile, ultimately deciding to change the subject. That's not important, Gwen. But I do have another question. I answered, watching her fix all of her attention on me. She cocked a brow in question and I let out a sigh. What happened to the Alpha's former mate? I'm just curious though. Her eyes narrowed, looking at me like I'd said something treacherous. I made a face at her and she snorted before returning to the familiar serious demeanor that made me uncomfortable. It's a forbidden topic. No one in the pack knows exactly what happened, but we are forbidden from talking about it. You'd hear some gossip here and there sometimes though, we don't know what's true and what's not. Like what? She cleared her throat and gave me the most concerned stare I'd seen in her eyes. Larissa, sometimes, being too inquisitive could land you in so much more trouble than you can imagine. But if you're really curious, perhaps you should just ask Annalise. Rumors say she was the only one there when everything happened. Of course, Annalise yet again. I nodded at her answer and turned to Declan, who was now playing with my crusted fingers. I had to ask Annalise. Was the Alpha's former mate good to him? Did something happen to her? Or he couldn't get over her just yet? I needed to know for his actions to make sense to me. I was so tempted to read meanings into his misleading actions, but now I was more worried about knowing who his mate was. I could not pursue my feelings until then. And I'd be damned to let myself hope that one day, he'll accept me as his mate if he was still attached to his former mate. Yet, I hated myself for caring regardless. This might just turn out to be a bloody repeat of my mistake with Stefan.
Caden's POV.
The tall trees within the pack compound stood monstrously, towering over everything within the space. Everything about the building screamed vintage, much like the figure that lived solely within the building and ruled over the pack. Right in the center of the compound was a water fountain reminiscent of the one back at my pack house. The figure sitting right in the middle had two heads that spew water into the fountain, joined at the neck like a two-headed dragon. The SUV swerved through the curved, tarred lane through to where the guards present had ushered us, and the ignition was turned off as soon as it had been parked. I was staring out the window blankly before there was a soft tap on my shoulders. Hunter was seated beside me with same stoic expression plastered on his face, tapping at my coat gently. "We're here, my lord." He spoke up and I could feel a frown form on my face. "I know that." I half snapped, reaching for the door lock before pushing it open. Jackson had alighted the SUV as well, standing and waiting for me to step out before reaching out to take my briefcase. I stared at the building from far off one last time, impressed by its regal architecture. I preferred the modernity of my pack house littered with artifacts. That was much better. Taking a deep breath, I made my way to where the building stood with my Beta and Jackson trailing right behind me. The guards who were familiar with my face ushered us into the living room. Inside the living room was a single cathedra and several armchairs embracing a monochromatic red and purple. I couldn't tell if it was her doing or that of the former Alpha. If it was the former, I was certain that she was out of her damn mind. "I would like to ask that you wait for a moment. The Luna would be here in a minute." One sweet-faced guard spoke up with a bow before disappearing from my field of view. The entire interior had an oriental undertone, very unfamiliar compared to the sweetness that I was used to. But none of that mattered at the moment. I needed to combat a mutual enemy, and I needed to do it fast. "Well, who do we have here?" I could recognize the sing-song voice from even a mile away, the same sugary voice that made even ants irritated. My attention shifted to the spiral staircase standing a little far from the main living room, making out the shadow of the shameless woman right before I could see her. She was dressed in a purple robe that flowed all the way to the ground, sweeping whatever was in her wake as she took dramatic steps down the stairs. Her dark hair, the color of the obsidian she so treasured, hung low past her bare shoulders. She had both hands out, although covered by the feathers that extended from the overly long sleeves as she bounced, finally flipping her hair when she had reached the cathedra in the living room. She was peering at me, her plastic smile not fading. She was beaming, crossing one leg over the other in exaggerated movements. I couldn't even tell if the purple polish on her nails were extensions or actual claws. She definitely was one delusional woman. The last time I checked, some overly cocky being I know was being a big baby about me visiting without prior notice. She finally drawled out with a smirk, looking at me. I saw mischief in her eyes, but I wasn't in the mood for her excesses.
This is strictly business, Lillian.
"The last time was you being your overbearing self." I countered swiftly, catching Jackson's struggle to stifle a laugh. She laughed at that, leaning away from the cathedra and towards me. "I won't have you talk down at me, Caden. Please watch your language, even if I have a soft spot for you." She continued with the same smile, her eyes widening in mock surprise. She leaned back with a small hair flip, stretching one hand out to admire her nail polish. "It's such a pity, don't you think, darling? That Jeremy isn't here to see you call me by my name. I do not believe that your son would fancy seeing you hit on an alpha that is young enough to be his sibling." I snickered back, causing her to grasp dramatically. She brought both hands to her chest in playful shock, her lips rounding into saucers before falling into a smile. "Jeremy is 15. You're not a baby, I don't fuck with babies," she pointed out, batting her eyes slowly. With another hair flip, she was completely recoiled into the cathedra and had her eyes closed. She finally opened them and smiled widely. "So, to what do I owe this unexpected visit, my love?" I straightened up, seeing as she looked the most serious she could muster. "One of my former men, my former Beta, was murdered a few days ago in the South Sea Pack." "Oh dear, I heard the tales. He met a good death, although I must say that I am proud of him for doing the unthinkable. Too bad he's dead now." She shot up her seat, still sitting, taunting with mock surprise on her face. I wanted to wipe that annoying smirk off her ugly face. She seemed to understand as she returned to her delusional sitting position. "Anyways, my love, you were saying?" "Don't call me that." "MHM." She nodded with the same goddamn smirk. What was I even thinking to have come here? Reasoning with this woman was a pain in the ass. I know he was murdered, he didn't just die. Besides, I am certain that they knew that he was once affiliated with my pack. Rumors have it that the Luna is aware of who he is, and that she is tied to whoever is behind this. I was struggling to hold it together. The mention of his name drove me mad every fucking time because I couldn't help but remember the stupid note Amaya had left me 2 years ago. So he thought Karma was no bitch. The fuck he did. So why are you telling me this? What am I to do with the information? It was my turn to smirk. My men need some assistance, so what better way to be sure? I heard the Luna of the Shadow Pack is excellent at stealing information from other packs. She cocked a brow at that, her smirk faltering so inconspicuously that I may have missed it if I didn't keep my eyes transfixed on her. Just like how you found out that my wife was no more before any other person found out. Tell me, do you have a spy in my pack? I will spare your life if you tell me the truth right now. She snickered back, bursting out in a loud, uncomfortable cackle. Not no more, she corrected, pointing her fingers at me before rolling her eyes with the same playful tingle. Eloped with her lover, that's more like it. I felt my company shift uncomfortably in their seats at that. My fists had formed on their own, wanting to pulverize her face. Her indifference and guts were really testing my patience. But no good would come out of attacking her pack this instant. We were outnumbered, even if I could easily overpower even the strongest wolf here. I'll help you as you want, she continued, forcing me to look away from the wine bar ahead of me and straight at her, even if her bright red lipstick was severely distracting. But you must meet my demands. I cocked a brow, crossing my hands.
Your hand in marriage,
she yelled out, tossing her hands in the air as though it was the most obvious thing in the world. Don't act so dense, for crying out loud. I object, I snapped harshly, rising to my feet. I'd had more than enough of her nonsense. I'd take my leave now, if you can't help. Wait, not so fast, Caden. She drawled again, smirking at me. You're so touchy-feely, fuck. You have a better proposal? What's better than marriage? That way, I'll do all the work for you for free, in exchange for your love. Lillian. All right. 10 pieces of 10-carat diamonds. Deal? 4. 7. 5. Finally, she has a poker expression. As if thinking carefully, she nodded and the smirk was back. 5 pieces of 10-carat diamonds, it is. I'll have it delivered as soon as you get the job done, I replied, straightened the coat I wore. Hunter and Jackson rose to their feet as well, leaving her a bow before walking out of the building. I could hear her snicker and almost pictured that eerie smirk on her face as she did. But it no longer mattered. She may be a delusional bitch, but she was excellent at snooping out information in the most unconventional ways. The drive back to my pack house was fast. It seemed that time had flown as quickly as the wind. It was evening as soon as it had been morning. Quickly dismissing my right-hand men, I continued up the stairs only to meet the one whom I wanted to cross paths with the least. She was just stepping out of Declan's room, dressed in a bloody transparent sleepwear. The shorts were definitely shorter than comfortable. I could feel my wolf's excitement at the sight of her, however. She twitched when she noticed me standing in front of my door, staring at her instead of walking in. Good evening, Alpha. She muttered almost inaudibly, struggling to wrap the thin robe properly over her torso. In doing that, I found my eyes trailing over her figure. Damn, she would make a good fuck in my bed. Come here, I said without thinking. The only thoughts in my head were eating her out. She seemed surprised, pointing at herself before taking careful steps in my direction. Is everything okay? I nodded, finally twisting the doorknob open. She hesitantly followed me in, pattering with soft steps. I shut the door behind her, now fully taking her entire form in. Her hand sat on the ridges of the robe in a bid to hold them in place. But her neckline was still visible, as was that part of her neck that always pulled me in. It smelled of soft roses again, and I was beginning to feel that familiar tightness in my pants. Caden, what the actual fuck? Are you going to? No. I snapped before I could catch myself. She was staring at me weirdly in response to my sudden outburst. Cocking her head to the side, the way she was looking at me was alluring. And I was beginning to smell the pheromones consume the room. Fuck. I reached for her hair instead, watching her attention trained on my arm before pulling away the elastic band that held her hair in its ponytail. I heard her gasp and whip her head to look at me in surprise. "Wear your hair down. It's an order." "But," I said, "it's an order." I intercepted and she nodded with visible hesitation. "That's all. You may leave." She stared at me again, muttering something under her breath before stepping back and wrapping the robe around her torso again. I couldn't tell if she was glaring at me now or simply staring. She nodded after a moment and turned to leave the room. I let out a breath I didn't even know I was holding as soon as I heard the door lock, running straight to the bathroom. The heat was coursing through my veins without mercy. Has it gotten so bad that merely the sight of her was tempting in all the wrong ways? In the bathroom, I stared down at the bulge that had now formed in my pants before. The fuck was I even thinking? I bit my bottom lip, clenching my eyes and fists in a bid to get rid of the crude thoughts in my head. Then I made a resolve and walked into the shower, deciding to douse myself in cold water. Maybe it would help, because it made no sense to grow an erection just at the sight of her. Then I realized that perhaps it was happening for a reason. She was my mate after all, no matter how much I wanted to hate it. And mating season was fucking near.